Ask any slap-fighting fan who really won the war between Darius Mata-Varona and Wolverine, and you won't get a straight answer. Some will tell you Darius won it, hands down, no debate. Others will tell you Wolverine did. And the strange part is, they're both right. Two men, one rivalry, two different victories, years apart, and neither one tells the full story on its own. To understand what actually happened between them, you have to go back to before either of them had a belt, a title, or a following back to when Darius Mata-Varona was just a kid finding out, almost by accident, what he was built for. Darius Mata-Varona grew up in Kirbyville, Missouri, a small town not exactly known for producing world-class athletes. He wasn't a prodigy handed a platform. Nobody was grooming him for a heavyweight division. By his own account, he found slap fighting almost by chance, and the way he tells it, his first real fight wasn't against some warm-up opponent. It was against a man closing in on 320 pounds. Darius has said that getting hit by someone that size should have scared him off for good. Instead, something in him switched on. He didn't back away from the power, he got obsessed with it. That detail matters more than it seems. Most people who get hit that hard once decide the sport isn't for them. Darius decided it was the only thing he wanted to do. Friends and early training partners describe the same theme over and over, not raw talent first, but obsession first. He built his identity around a single idea, one he still repeats today: no one outworks me, no matter what. That's not a slogan for the cameras. It's the closest thing Darius has to a personal philosophy, and it's the thread that runs through every chapter of what comes next: the rise, the war, the fall, and the comeback. Before he ever stepped into a power slap venue, Darius had already separated himself from the pack. And it wasn't only about power. At 6'1" and 265 pounds, he wasn't the biggest heavyweight in the sport. What made him dangerous was the combination recorded striking data later clocked his peak hand velocity at nearly 8 meters per second, with force numbers that put him among the hardest hitters anyone had measured. But velocity alone doesn't explain a 17-0 record. Chin does. Recovery does. The ability to absorb a career-altering hit from a 320-pound opponent, get back up, and treat it as fuel instead of a warning sign that's not something you can train into someone. That's temperament. Coaches who worked with him early on point to something else too. He didn't just want to win rounds, he wanted to be the hardest working person in whatever room he walked into. It's a mentality that made him nearly impossible to prepare for, because opponents weren't just facing his hands, they were facing a level of conditioning and stubbornness that didn't quit when the fight got long. That trait would matter more than anyone realized, because his defining fight would turn out to be the longest one the sport had ever seen. By the time most fans had heard his name, Darius was already 17-0, moving through the Slapfight Championship's heavyweight division without a real challenge in sight. This wasn't Power Slap. There was no TBS deal, no Dana White backing it, no Nevada State Athletic Commission sanctioning the cards. This was the underground version of the sport, rougher, less regulated, and, in a strange way, more dangerous, because there was no safety net if something went wrong. And it was in that underground scene that Darius built the record and the reputation that would eventually get him noticed by the biggest names in combat sports. That record is the reason everything else in this story exists. Without 17-0, there's no invitation to the big stage. Without the reputation as the most feared heavyweight in an underground scene, there's no reason for a promotion backed by UFC President Dana White to come looking for him. But before any of that happened, Darius still had to get through the fight that would define him, and it wasn't against a stranger. It was against a man he already knew. In 2021, Darius Mata-Varona and a fighter known as Wolverine met for a war that slap fighting fans still talk about today. 27 rounds. No quick knockout, no early stoppage, just two men refusing to go down for longer than almost anyone had seen in the sport. It is, to this day, widely considered the greatest slap fight ever recorded. 27 rounds means 27 chances for either man to fold. Neither did. When it finally ended, Darius was the one with his hand raised. At the time, it looked like the clearest possible answer to the question of who was better. Darius had gone the distance against the toughest opponent of his career and come out on top. It should have been the final word. It wasn't. Because a few years later, both men would end up standing across from each other again, this time on a stage neither of them had access to back in 2021, with a title on the line and a very different outcome waiting. In November of 2022, Dana White announced the launch of Power Slap, a sanctioned, regulated version of the sport he'd been obsessed with since 2017. "I saw some footage of slap fighting on social media, and I was instantly hooked," White said at the announcement. "I knew what needed to be done to make it a real sport, just like we did with MMA." Backed by the UFC, sanctioned by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, and headed for an 8-episode debut on TBS, Power Slap wasn't just another slap fighting promotion. It was an attempt to turn the sport into something legitimate, and it needed credible, proven fighters to make that case. Darius was one of the first names brought in, signed as one of Power Slap's original coaches. On paper, it should have felt like a coronation, the underground king, finally getting the platform his record deserved. But the underground and the mainstream stage are not the same arena. Different cameras, different pressure, different judges. And waiting in that same cast house, coaching on the same reality show, was the one man who already knew exactly how far Darius could push a fight, because he'd been in it with him for 27 rounds. Power Slap's first ever event needed a headliner, and the promotion built it around the rivalry everyone already knew: Darius versus Wolverine. For Wolverine, this wasn't just another main event. It was personal. He had gone back and forth with Darius before, and by his own admission, beating him meant something different than beating anyone else. To go against somebody that I've went against before, a nemesis type of guy, it felt great to win the belt, Wolverine would later say. It felt great to beat Darius. That single sentence should tell you everything about how much the 2021 results still weighed on him. This wasn't a fresh matchup. It was unfinished business, playing out in front of cameras, on a card built by the biggest combat sports promoter in the world. Power Slap 1 ended the way almost nobody expected. Wolverine landed the shot, Darius went down. And the underground king, the man who had never lost, the man who had already beaten this exact opponent in the longest fight the sport had ever seen, lost by knockout. Wolverine took the heavyweight title. In one night, the story flipped. This is the moment that reframes everything that came before it. The 2021 war wasn't the end of the rivalry, it was only the first half. And the second half didn't go Darius's way. He walked into Power Slap as the proven winner of the greatest fight the sport had ever produced. And he walked out having lost the one match that actually came with a belt attached. What followed wasn't a single bad night. It was a stretch that tested whether Darius still belonged at the top of the sport at all. He lost again at Power Slap 2. He lost again at Power Slap 5. 3 defeats inside a promotion that was still trying to prove itself to a skeptical sporting world, and Darius, the fighter it had built its first headline event around, was losing more than he was winning. For a competitor whose entire identity was built on being unbeatable, on being the hardest worker in any room, that kind of stretch does more damage than the knockouts themselves. It raises the question that follows every fallen favorite. Was the underground record real, or was it padded against lesser competition? Was the 2021 win against Wolverine a fluke of endurance, not skill? Darius had to sit with those questions in public, on a platform still finding its own footing. While critics who'd never bought into slap fighting as a real sport in the first place had a very visible example to point to. Comebacks that mean something are never just about winning again, they're about what got fixed in between. For Darius, the turnaround came at Power Slap 14 with a win over James Stonier, and it continued at Power Slap 16 in a hard-fought win over Wes Maynor. 2 wins, on their own, don't erase 3 losses. But they marked something the losing streak hadn't shown: a fighter making adjustments instead of just showing up again and hoping the outcome would be different. By the end of 2025, Power Slap recognized that turnaround with its Comeback of the Year award. It wasn't a lifetime achievement nod. It was a direct acknowledgement that Darius had rebuilt himself from the specific low point of PS1, PS2, and PS5, and had done it in front of the same audience that watched him fall. So did Darius really beat Wolverine? In 2021, over 27 rounds. Yes, unquestionably. But that fight didn't settle anything between them the way it looked like it had. It set up a second collision, on a bigger stage, where Wolverine got the version of the story he needed: the belt, the redemption. The answer to a question that had clearly been eating at him for years. Both men can point to a night where they beat the other. Both of those nights are real. Maybe that's the more honest legacy here, not a clean underdog story, but a rivalry where neither man got to keep the win. Darius's greatest victory helped build the platform that later handed him his most public defeat, and his response to that defeat, 3 losses. Then, a rebuilt fighter standing in the win column again might end up mattering more to how Power Slap's early history gets remembered than the 27 rounds that started it all. The question was never really who beat who. It's whether either man could survive what winning cost them. Darius is still answering that one fight at a time in T.